up? We finally got it. RF50 F1.4. So Canon released this stuff. Mischief Night in the US. I don't know if other countries celebrate Mischief Night. We got the 50-1.4. We got the 24-1.4. We've got this internal 70-200 in white and black. And we've got the RFS 7.8. If you're using this, let me know what weird shit you're getting into. Nothing about this excites me at this point. Maybe we'll get into some of that content a couple years down the line, but this is not exciting to me. We're going to focus on some of these other ones. This lens in particular is the one that I'm excited about, right? So I've just rented the 50 f1.2 and was shooting here in Colorado and in Utah with it. Loved it, great lens. We'll get into that, but really probably not the tool for the job. You can check out that video here. We'll look at analytics a little bit later, but this 1.4 is definitely the version that I want to try. I don't know if I feel comfortable with the label travel landscape photographer, but that's most fitting. And this is certainly a better tool for the job. So on the hardest hiking, some of the stuff that I did in this video, the 1.2 is kind of a pain to drag around. It is about the exact same weight as the Sigma 28 Art that I adapt, and typically like so much for this A-roll shot, for Astro, just generally for landscape. I don't know. I use this lens a lot as prime when I'm not using the f4 travel zooms. So it's similar, and this isn't fun to carry around either. This is also a little bit longer adapted, so less fun in the capture clip than even the 50. But ideally, for someone like me, we would end up with something like this 1.4. So I'm excited to give this a shot. I personally don't think I'll ever pull the trigger on this or this without trying the 1.4 first. So hopefully that's something that I can rent in the future, and we'll see how that goes. So we also have the 24mm lens here, previously the 35 as well. Those three lenses kind of share the same physical design, almost exactly. The point is that they all control focus breathing really well. This VCM motor, based on the videos that I've seen, seems to be really great. So I think people are going to appreciate that, but they're definitely, I guess, hybrid, but kind of video focused. The two big outstanding questions for me are how they're all going to look. Do they follow the same design as the 35, sort of under designed in the corners? And the second question is really how quick they'll be available. I think there are probably pent up demand for these basically. So estimated ship 12/12 from B&H. I feel like if you haven't pre-ordered some of these, specifically the 50 and 24, that could be a hard thing to get. In this latest Canon release, we also got the internal zoom 70-200 in white and black, which is interesting. Obviously a lens that Canon has had. I've used this. The comparison between the F8, the comparison between the F4 and the F2.8 is one of the videos that kind of kickstarted this channel. Obviously, this has been a big star on my videos here, one of my favorite lenses. I have rented this. I think forced to choose, if I ever go 70-200 f2.8, I could see myself still going with this more photo-focused version, or travel-focused version, rather. I'm not sure what exactly you would call it. This lens isn't super exciting for me. I feel like I would be paying quite the premium for some of these video features and the internal zoom. This is just much, much more packable. I think people have worried about this external zoom for a long time. I've had the 24-105, probably going on 4.5 years now, maybe. The 70-200 f4, which is a fan favorite on the channel, and perhaps my favorite lens. I've had that for probably going on 3+ years. The longer I have these, the more I use them, and being able to see how they've held up in that external zoom design, the extending barrel design, I don't see a lot of issues with mine, so I'm less worried about that, I think, than I've ever been. That said, I just came back from Great Sand Dunes National Park. I have sand everywhere in my bag and all my stuff. I made sure to only bring primes there, so the 28 and the 85 were my two lenses that I packed. I would have loved something to pick out landscapes, whether the 70-200. I also wanted to bring the 100-400 for that purpose as well, but just decided, hey, I don't know how bad this sand and wind is going to be. I'm not going to risk it. And I'm very thankful I didn't. So I think even if you're photo first, if that's kind of your thing, if you're in the wildest environments all the time, if that's how you make your money, if that's how you shoot and you do that often, I think this is appealing. The 24-105 internal, this is not appealing to me really whatsoever. I just don't have a use for this type of lens internally. But you have the option. It will be interesting to see if Canon continues both this line and if they continue the 70-200 line. We'll see if we get Mark IIs for both. I'll double check this before I publish, but these take teleconverters, so that might be interesting to some people as well. I don't know. I think I'm still tempted to go with something like this if I were to ever go f2.8, but no reason to upgrade at the moment for myself, but very cool to see, I think, generally. Sony's 70-200 f2.8 is internally zooming as well, but you're going to pay this Canon premium. Really going to be most fitting for people that get the most video use. These aperture rings, I don't think work with anything prior to the R5, Mark II, R1, and maybe R8, something like that. So at the moment, only newer bodies are going to be able to use this aperture ring. I don't know. It seems like people are a little bit butthurt about that online. I tend not to care quite as much, but it is a little bit of a slap in the face to put this out and to not have it compatible with some of the most common bodies. I'm not sure if it works on the R6 Mark II. So double check that. If you have a hankering for this to be working on your body, double check before you go out and pre-order. Otherwise, I think if you haven't pre-ordered these, it could be a very, very long time before you get hands on. So we'll see what happens. I would love to sneak in a rental of either the 50, the 24, or 35 this year. Obviously, I want to withhold judgment about these lenses until I use any one of them, specifically to test the form factor for my use, but also to see if I care about this aperture ring in a real way, or the corners. I think under designing a lens in the corners is kind of like a perfectly good design choice, particularly if you're trying to keep cost, weight, and size down. They also seem to be great corrected anyway, so I'm not sure if many people need to worry about that as much as maybe the hubbub is. Where I get a little butthurt is kind of paying this premium for that hybrid design that I don't really care for. In the perfect world for me, as a photo first shooter, I want this video, or someone who's going to use it locked off on a tripod, I want this to be even a little bit smaller and or better in the corners and or a little bit cheaper for just simply a photo-focused version. That said, you've kind of got, for the people complaining, you've got two choices, right? This is now firmly kind of filling out that midline for Canon between the nifty 50 and the 1.2. And now that we have some other semi-affordable options in that middle, it's hard to say that the whole line is completely neglected. I think there is something for pretty much everybody. It's definitely not robust, the full lineup. That's for sure, but I think there is something for everybody. And if you're disappointed by this lens, if you're disappointed by the design in these three altogether, the thing you have to ask yourself is, are you willing to switch systems to get away from this and get some more choice? And that's tough. Personally, you'll notice I haven't made any major purchases in a very, very long time, with the exception of the R8, if you want to call that major, but I purchased that with the intention to sell. It was so fitting for the workflow. I miss it so much for recording long form video and having a second body that I kept it 6 months longer than I intended to, but I'm down to one body. The R6 is now getting on 4 full years old. I am leaving the door open for myself to straddle a system. Maybe not for necessarily this kind of lens, but I am intentionally keeping my Canon kit to the core stuff that really works for me, and I'll continue to drive it all into the ground until we see just a little bit more out of Canon and their roadmap. I have not wanted to commit to anything. Also, personally, even if I was super stoked on all of this, had already tried it and was ready to go, not in a buying, I don't have any buying capacity right now, I'll put it that way. In the broader context, some of the things that I don't like that this lineup represents is the fact that now that there is something in the middle, first party from Canon, it's sort of similar to last episode of this podcast. We looked at the RF 28-70 f2.8, that compact travel version, zoom to start. When we looked at this, I think this represents potentially some negatives for people looking at the broader range. In the context of these primes, I think it means we are not going to see any third-party fast primes for a while. I think Canon, they're going to get their money from these. They're going to make sure that people who have really been waiting for something like this are heavily pushed into buying this first-party option before there's even anything else on the market to try and go after. Obviously, no inside info, but that's just my take. Also, broadly, if you were to average out and take a look across the entire board, you could summarize and say Canon is probably at least a half gen behind Sony in mirrorless lenses. In some areas, probably a full generation is more accurate, but we do have now, after 2024 and some of the stuff that has come out this year, a lot more to look at, and many of the designs are somewhat unique, which Canon's going to keep leaning into that differentiator. We'll see if that pays off. Again, not sure if that's the best fit for photo-first shooters, but I'm here for the interesting stuff. I think it might only be a matter of time before they come out with something that doesn't quite have immediate precedent from the past designs that is really, truly quite special. I think you can point to something like the 28-70 f2. A lot of drawbacks to that lens. Haven't used it, but certainly a lot of crazy positives if you're treating that as a handful of primes. So we'll see. If you're new, check out the 50 f1.2 video if you want to see some of the shots that I took with that, maybe some of my other thoughts on using that lens. I sent out a poll to see who was most excited about what, and the 51.4 is definitely leading there. A little bit surprised to see the response, at least from this channel, the demographics here, or what I would have guessed. For the 70-200 f2.8 internal zooms, shout out to the probably one person that is looking for that 7.8, but we'll see what we can get as far as a rental in so that I can compare that experience directly with the F1.2 experience that I just had. Like I said, we are crashing the podcast. This is called the Upload Iceberg. This will be episode 18. Last episode, another one kind of starting with Canon's newest release of the 28-70. The concept of the iceberg being if this tip is the videos that I upload, like this 51.2 video, we talk about kind of everything below the surface here in terms of channel growth, monetization, things like that. So let's jump in. We can look at the analytics on this 50mm video. We'll talk about the newest sponsor here, which I was really excited about and am excited about moving forward. We will maybe mention next video coming up and then end with some channel analytics, which we haven't done in a while. I'm not going to spend much time there today either because it's been relatively quiet, but we will take a look. So if we come back to this 50mm video, overall, broad statement, a little disappointed with how this has been performing, particularly because I think it's one of the weird things about YouTube, right? This was such a fun video to shoot photos for, such a fun video to kind of piece together and make. And I felt like I was shooting really well. I feel like I'm still shooting really well, and hopefully that comes through in the next video as well. But if we look at the, for some, the dreaded ranking by views, this is a 4 out of 10. It started really strong. So right out of the gate, kind of YouTube testing that initially, trailing off a little bit and really petering out now. I think if you're me, the hope for this video is that you still get a little bit more search traffic. YouTube test this with a few more people. If it does well, showing that for search, maybe this gets a little bit of a slow revival into something that actually gets seen again in browse or suggested. Really would like to see a better click-through rate here. So early on, you don't want to look at click-through rate kind of in a vacuum. You want to look at it amongst impressions. And so high impressions, low click-through rate, as long as it continues to get shown and the impressions continue to climb, that's fine. It's typically an indicator that YouTube is showing it to a much broader audience than maybe what you're used to seeing. So was again, really happy with the start here, but has since petered out. And, I want to see something much better than 3 kind of in this region once YouTube has stopped testing this at a much wilder pace. So we'll see how that goes. Pretty standard AVD here, which sort of is expected. This is a 7-minute, 50-second video. Shorter probably, or shorter than at least I hope I could entertain you for. Shorter than I would hope I could keep you around from a retention standpoint. If we look at this curve from a comparison point of view, not terrible compared to other videos of this length on YouTube. If we come in here, you can see a sharp dip. We'll get to this in a second, but you might wonder, this is a little bit of a sponsor read. It's hard to avoid this. We'll talk about this in a second in a little bit more detail. One thing that I really like here is this breakout of segments is fairly new in the YouTube Studio Analytics section. You can see new versus returning viewers. You can see kind of the stark AVD difference between new and returning, which is really interesting. Sort of exactly what you would expect, so not surprising, but just still interesting to see and understand that your returning viewers are just going to give you so much more time to flesh out some of these points and are willing to stay with you. What's more interesting is that both of these segments start to click away during that sponsor read, which for me is just one of those disconnects between being a creator and being an audience member, right? This and working with LRTimelapse is a really exciting moment on my journey, but clearly not for everyone, right? And I think there's a lot of sponsor fatigue on YouTube. I don't know how you beat this retention drop. It's something that fascinates me. And I'm going to spend a lot of time working to create just the best fitting offerings for people watching and to try to, flatten this out basically. And you can see subscribers versus non-subscribers very similar. Your subscribed audience is just going to give you much more leeway. Trying to see, I'm using the 85, so this camera's really far away, and I'm trying to see when my 30-minute record limit kicks in on me. It's coming up shortly here. But that's the overview for performance on this video. We'll see how that continues to play out if this gets another little hit in search. You can see that get a little external. That's probably Google traffic. So this might be one of those odd ones that does a little bit in Google search. Again, to be continued. The problem with the R6 is that after you start the second recording, it's showing that I have a 10-minute timer based on heat, not the lovely 30-minute timer that is so generous. The other thing I did with this video real quick before we get to the next stuff is a thumbnail test. I don't know. These are all kind of the same thumbnail, different background picture, different variations. I don't know. This takes a lot of time. I don't know that I'll do this for every video moving forward. YouTube, even after a couple days, couldn't determine a clear victor. And so while I think the premise of testing these is very cool, I'm just not sure that the value is quite there. Like, I probably don't need to spend 30 minutes on each variation here. And I think for the next couple of videos, I'll probably just trust the gut, go with the thumbnail that I think is going to perform best. And if it's truly, really, truly bombing, swap it out and then spend the time to jump into Photoshop there. So a little bit on LRTimelapse affiliate link in this video, as you'll see. That's what I'm excited to test here. Huge shout out for working with me. I've been trying to get into LRTimelapse for over a year. So last time I was visiting Colorado was mid-October through mid-November of 2023. I remember taking a few time lapses then. Took a lot in New Zealand earlier this year, and I probably should go back and reprocess them with LRTimelapse to improve on the flicker, improve on kind of that day to night. That's the biggest gap, I think, in functionality. If you don't have something like LRTimelapse shooting that hero day to night, night to day transitions, that's what this software excels at doing. And that's going to be really, really difficult to do without it, if not impossible. How I've done it in the past is to bring in all the photos as frames into Premiere. And then you can kind of use Lumetri color, anything similar in DaVinci to slap a color grade over those images. The problem is you're not really applying that to the raw photos, obviously, or the TIFFs even. So, you're a little bit limited in how much you can push and pull there. And if you have LRTimelapse, one of the cool things for some people, I'm pretty tied to Lightroom, so I typically will export all the frames and string them together. But you can do all of those adjustments on this panel within the software itself. So maybe if I just open mine up real quick. So if we open this up, this is the time lapse that I took from my trip to Great Sand Dunes. You can see we're starting in the day, we're transitioning to night. Once the stars come out and we're shooting the back half of the Milky Way up here-ish, I'm going to transition to another one of the Milky Way time lapses that I shot on a previous night. That's here. You can see all these programmatic adjustments are being made in the metadata. Just a really cool tool. The founder is pretty awesome. He has some great tutorials of his own. And it didn't take me, I've watched many of them, but once I finally got hands-on, did not take me much time to get in here and really make some cool progress on some of these sequences. So I'm excited to share that, excited for the sponsor. That was a one video sponsorship, but the thing that I'm excited to test is kind of the affiliate relationship there. If there is enough of a fit with the audience here, that this is a good fitting affiliate product to offer. Because generally, and I think I've talked about this in a full episode of the podcast at some point, I think maybe episode 4, I don't know, long time ago, ideally want to support smaller companies in their affiliate programs. So work with smaller affiliate programs just generally, and really want to cut down to the things that are most fitting. And so some of the ones that I'm enrolled in now, even though I love the products, they're not the most fitting for this audience, particularly something like Recut. I use it all the time on literally every single video project, but I get the sense that it's not the most fitting for this current audience. So particularly, this was a poll that I wanted to run, kind of like, what's the effort you put into sharing these things? And it doesn't seem like many of you are making your own videos, in which case Recut is not necessarily the best fitting tool, despite how awesome it is. Same thing for this screen share utility. While I think a lot of people can benefit from this, even if they're not a creator, Screen Studio might not be the best fitting affiliate program here on this channel. So excited to see kind of if this is a little bit more fitting. If it's not overall, happy to kind of showcase how I'll be using this, because I'll be using it a lot. Every single video, I've taken a lot of time lapses over the years, and I'm really, really excited to do more of that day to night transition stuff. And now that I finally have a tool that can help me process those quickly, efficiently, and in a great way. Also, one more shout out to Peak Design for the travel bags. Took them to Great Sand Dunes, have been loving them. On this broader Colorado trip, I'm basically living out of a suitcase already. And that's one of the ones that I'm living out of. They're very good for handy weekend trips where you're not packing a bunch of stuff. They're holding up great. They gifted me their tech pouch and the 50-liter duffel, and I've been really happy with them so far. So if you're interested in that stuff, go check it out. I'll be spending a lot of time on the Peak Design channel as well, because sometimes you got to maintain and tune those tripods, and I have a lot of sand in mine. I think a little worried that could be hopefully not a casualty, but that's going to require a good bit of effort and toil to get that perfectly clean. I think the rest of my gear seemed to survive pretty well. Weather sealing does its job. You can see the sand when you get out of there, deeply embedded all around the gasket. That does a great job of keeping it out of your actual camera. You can brush and blow that out before taking your stuff off. And I was using some filters in front of the glass for much of that trip. So really no worries from a camera perspective and a lens perspective on that trip. My bag, my clothes, my tripod, all a much, much different story. So shout out to Peak Design for having the 28-minute tuning video that I'll be in and out of over the next, hopefully not more than weeks. Next video is going to be about the dunes. I think I'm going to try to position that video for browse and suggested traffic. So again, kind of going back to that idea of really centering around a clickable thumbnail and title and a story, something that is a little bit wider reach potentially than just a search topic. So I've had mixed results with this. I think that's how you get explosive growth. It's also, I think, very tricky. Targeting search is easier in a lot of ways. You can see even in something like this last podcast episode, around the 20 to 70, by targeting this release in a timely fashion with a thumbnail that I spent time on and jumping right into the content, this just much, much more reach than any of the other podcast episodes for sure. And good reach is in terms of video generally. I've said this before, but kind of a successful video for me, views-wise, I like to try to hit my subscriber base, right? That's why this 1,500 views on the Canon 51.2 video feels a little slow right now and a little underperforming. I would love to hit kind of that 4,250 views on any video that I produce, at least in the moment. That's really hard to sustain, I think, as you grow. But early on, I think that's doable as long as you're giving the video some time to breathe and are a little bit patient. Targeting search, I think that's possible. You can see that happens with many of the other videos, but not all of them. Not all of them for sure. So we'll get into the dunes. I think I'll structure it as maybe 3 tips for your photography. I only have about 5 sentences in the outline so far. I have a lot more in my head. We'll see how that comes out. Probably, or definitely hoping to get that video out before Thanksgiving here. So late November, we'll see if I can hit that. Ideally much earlier, but we'll see how that goes. Since this video, one of the new things I've done is started to shoot in C-Log 3. Brand new to me. Really going pretty easy on the grades, using kind of a standard transform LUT to bring it back to 709, messing around with that. Probably don't need to shoot it for something like this. In fact, I think it's probably best not to. But something like this in a controlled environment with light is good to shoot standard and just save the time, in my opinion. But I'm trying it out today just to see how this looks. Really hoping I didn't botch the exposure. Really hoping that the Samyang 85 is locking on to the eyes at this distance as well. So more on that to come. The dunes are incredible. Hopefully that'll be a video worth checking out. And if I structure it around tips, hopefully that will be helpful. Overall channel analytics. We haven't done this in a while. Welcome to the new subscribers here, up to 4,260. By design, this is a show that I produce a new episode of at each subscriber milestone. For the first many episodes, that was every 100 subscribers, intentionally. And like I said, by design, it's going to slow down a little bit. So every 250 new subscribers will be the trigger for me. The intention was, if I'm growing much, much faster, I don't want to take away from main channel video production to produce this show. Like I want to keep it rolling, but don't want to prioritize it. So that would slow things down if I were growing really fast. If I continued to grow kind of at this linear rate, which I have seen for a long time now, then I want to slow the cadence even more, right? So at this point, unless we see some explosive growth, these episodes are going to come out 2.5 times as slowly. Again, in an effort to allow me to focus on just shooting, getting better at photography and enjoying that, particularly while I'm out here in Colorado. But also, I think, or my strategy is to put that time into main channel videos until I grow a little faster. Also, I think this is just a less interesting growth period, right? Early on, kind of when I started this show at 2,500 subscribers, just feels a little bit more exciting. There's more to it. From 4 to probably 10 or 20,000, I think it's just a lot less exciting, generally, maybe to people. I've said this before, this is sort of the point where you get some like spammy inbound sponsorship reach, things like that. And you're just at the cusp of working with some smaller companies like LRTimelapse. I think that's completely run by the founder or super small team, if not. So, I expect things to change on that front, maybe 10 or 20K. We'll see. So just a quick look, everything's sort of as normal here. I'm seeing lower than average sustained views. If we look at last 48 hours, like I will typically, if I'm in YouTube Studio, I'll typically have this pane open just to see if anything's popping in particular. Yeah, I think the last couple episodes of this show, we've been running a little bit hotter, but I haven't had like a big blowout search hit in a long time. So this makes sense. Kind of everything is as expected. And it's a reason why we're not going to go through the full-blown analytics here. There's just nothing super interesting that has changed period to period. Not super excited by this level of revenue. It's great to have. I'm not unthankful for it. The interesting thing around this time of year is to see how much this increases just based on the rates around the holidays. You're doing nothing. How much does it go up? But we're not making a lot of videos, trying to make good videos occasionally, as opposed to bad or half-assed videos frequently. We might not see a financial bump too much on this channel when we look at that. And then we talked specifically about this video's retention right around the sponsor read. So I'd love to, like I said, figure out a way to make these a little bit more interesting, a little bit more fitting, or to talk about products like LRTimelapse in a way that can meet viewers where they're at. For instance, this has a free trial. You don't need to purchase anything to get into it. I have the pro version and plan to make full use of this for a really long time. Like I said, with some of the stuff that I'm making and some of the stuff that I plan to make. At the same time, this should be fairly approachable for everyone just to give a try and see if it works for you, if it's at all something that you shoot. Most people don't, though. I think personally, the thing that I like about time lapses is, and I've done this a lot with the Milky Way, it's just kind of sitting out there for an hour and a half while the camera runs. I think that's typically one of the more enjoyable experiences that I have in the field. That's kind of hard to relate to people, right? It's difficult to express how I feel in the field during some of this stuff. You only get to see the finished product. But for something like running a Milky Way time lapse, it's nice to sit out there. And certainly the Great Sand Dunes was kind of high on the list of experiences there from being out there solo. I think we'll probably keep analytics to that for the moment. This podcast has crossed over a year, so maybe there's a little bit of a deep dive at some point into podcast performance. Again, this latest video around the 28 to 70 f2.8 was quite the banger in comparison. I'll continue to try to target search with some of these episodes. Obviously, this one is looking to target some of the search for the 50 F1.4 right after it's released. So we can revisit how this has done. But this is not something I plan to stop anytime soon. We just want to keep this going, slow burning. So good to see like a little bit of picked up growth here. Big shout out to LRTimelapse for sponsoring the last video. Check this out if you're interested. Another big shout to Peak Design if you're interested in the tech pouches, the duffels, any of the stuff that I've already been using for years. Go check them out. Affiliate links below. Same thing if you're looking for a rental. If you don't need any of those things, when in doubt, wait it out. Please carefully avoid the call out affiliate links. Just happy that you're here. I think that's all I've got for episode 18. Like I said, going to be doing these every 250 subscribers now, which means I probably should say happy holidays, happy new year. It's election day in the US, so happy election day to half of us, depending on how that goes. And I'll see you in the next one.